In this video, we are going to assemble a BREmote version 2. Now, before we get started, please have a look at the video description as well as the comments below this video in case there have been any changes made to the assembly instructions or to some small steps. I'm going to link them or describe them there. So please pause the video now, have a short look if anything has changed, and then come back to the video. Okay, so to get started building the remote, we're first going to concentrate on the TX modules, and you can see both of them here. This is the, I call it top module, and this is the bottom module. Now, the first thing we're going to do is on the top module, somewhere here, you're going to see a label which will either say 868 megahertz or 915 megahertz. Now, that's the operating frequency that this antenna is tuned to. And please make sure that this is the correct one for the country you're living in. So for basically all Europe, 868 is the correct one. And for US, Australia, New Zealand, 915 is the correct one. If you're not sure, have a look at the GitHub, and there is going to be a table with the compatible frequencies and the versions of the PCB that exist. Okay, so now we're going to prepare those two modules for assembly. And for that, we are going to need a soldering iron, a few cables, as well as our displays. Now, on this top board, there's not much to do, only one thing, which is to mount the two display modules, which are going to make up our big display. For that, first of all, we can remove those protective films on top, like that. Don't need them anymore. And then we can place them on the PCB. They go on the side with the RF module or with the processor module, not on the side with the connector. And then up here you can see a small pin 1 marking. And sadly, on those modules, there's not really a pin 1 marking, but there's one side with a label or with text, and the other side is blank. The side with the text needs to go to the pin 1 marking. So just install them like that, push them in. Second one as well, make sure the text is facing the pin 1 marking or the other display, like that. Now you can see this sits in nice and flush. Again, the text, as you can see, is on this side. So just compare with the video, make sure it looks like that. And then on the bottom, you can see all those pins now need to be soldered. I'm going to do that in a second, actually show you on video. Before we do that, let me show you what we need to do with the bottom PCB. On the bottom PCB, on this side also, nothing to do. On this side, we need to attach some cables and a vibration motor. For the wires that we're going to attach, I like to use silicone wire because it's a little bit more flexible and a little bit more robust to temperature. Now you're going to need 4 wires, so red, black, white, and green for the USB connection. And for those, I use 30 American wire gauge. I'm going to put the numbers here on the screen as well. And they have a length of 120 millimeters. On top of that, we're going to need 2 shorter but a little bit thicker wires. For those, I use 22 American wire gauge. Also, again, going to put this on the screen here, what it means in metric. And those have a length of 75 millimeters for the black and 50 millimeters for the red wire. We're going to attach them on this PCB as the label says. So down here we have 5 volts, D minus, D plus ground. That's the USB connection. We're going to attach red, white, green, black on here. For the top, there's battery minus and battery plus. So obviously that's the big wires. And black is minus, red is plus, like that. And then over here, we also have the 2 pads for the vibration motor. And here we're going to attach the vibration motor. Now, the motor at the moment has a black and a white wire. Black goes to minus, white goes to plus in this case. So as the first step, we're going to solder the 2 display modules to the top board. For that, make sure that the displays actually are flat to the PCB. So push down the edge of the PCB when soldering the first pin. Now we add a little bit of solder like that. Do that for the other side as well. And now you can see with those 2 pins soldered in place, the displays are nice and flat, parallel, no gap in the middle. That's how it should be. And now we can just solder all of the other pins. Now to make soldering the inner pins a bit more easier, we can already cut the outer ones. So for cutting them, just get a normal flush trim wire cutter and try to cut them as close as possible to the solder joint as possible. Not too close though. Overall, they just need to be the same height or lower than this IC. Then it should be fine. Okay, so I've also trimmed the inner wires. Make sure that there's nothing stuck on the solder joint. And then just like that, the top board is finished. Now, as I said, for the bottom board, we need to attach the wires for USB as well as battery and the vibration motor. And I like to start with the bottom row, so with the USB wires. Now, one thing that's very important for a good solder joint is to both pre-tin the ends of the wires as well as the pads before making the actual connection. The nice thing about silicone wire is that you can just strip them by using your fingernails. Just like that. Now, as I said, tin the ends of the wires. So by using a little bit of solder, just like that. Make sure they are nice and covered. And then as a second step, also cover the pads in some solder. Same for the big wires for the battery. Make sure to pre-tin them. Okay, and with that we also got those two wires soldered to the board. Now there's only the vibration motor left, so let me quickly get one. So here's our little vibration motor. Like said earlier, here the wire colors are not black and red, but black and white. And as you can see, even though the connections are already pre-tinned, I'm gonna add a little bit fresh solder. Then again, solder to the pads. So now let's continue with the assembly. And for that, first of all, we're going to apply some black tint film, so the stuff you use for car windows, to the display, and that will greatly improve the readability. We can compare this here. It basically blocks the sunlight from going into the individual LEDs and makes them not glow on their own. And especially in sunlight outside, this really improves the readability. So for that, we're going to take some of that window wrapping film, just cut a little bit off, a little bit bigger than our display. And now comes a bit of an annoying part. We need to get the protective film that protects the glue. So as you may be able to see, now I can peel off the protective film. We don't need that anymore. And we can attach this to the display. Nice and centered like that. Now we're just gonna push it on like that. And then I like to use my finger to like rub it on so it properly sticks. Now to get rid of the excess around the display, you can use an X-Acto knife and try to, like follow the contours. However, what I find a little bit easier is to just use a file and then to carefully file along the edge of the display until you can see the white of the display coming through. And that basically just cuts the film perfectly at the edge and also somehow not really melts, but combines the edge of the film with the display so it won't peel off so easily. And then once you've done that, you can usually just, it needs a little bit more over here. You can usually just pull this film to the bottom. Also a little bit more over here. And in the middle, like that. And then you can just rip it off and you have your display. Now obviously there's a little bit of a white color, white gaps visible here. But for that we can just use a normal Sharpie and then at a 45-degree angle Just cover that up like that. This top PCB can now be inserted into the top cover of the remote, as you can see here. Now, when you're filing this film off, make sure not to round those 4 corners, because as you can see, actually probably not on the camera, but as you can see in real life, this top part has like a small indentations in all 4 corners here, which actually stop the display from going through. So basically, if you push it in, then it should at some point stop and be nice and parallel to the top like that. And also the bottom right here should align with the 2 screw holes. Like that, we can now just insert the 2 screws. Same screws as I used in the version 1, self-tapping small screws, 2.2 millimeters diameter. The exact dimensions will be in the GitHub page. So we just attach it with those 2 screws. And now as a last step, we can already attach the flat flex cable. And for that, you can see this connector. We need to flip up this lever right here. Fully up like that. Then we take our small flat flex cable, and as you can see, it has a side with contacts, a shiny side and a blue side. Blue side always points away from the PCB. So we take that and insert it here. And then you should feel how it can go in like a few millimeters like that. Should be able to go in. Make sure it's parallel and close the flap. And then if you slightly pull, it should not come out. And also this blue line should be parallel to the connector like that. With that, the top is finished. Now let's mount the bottom PCB. And the bottom PCB gets mounted into this bottom half of the remote, or actually the main part of the remote. For that, you're going to take the whole PCB, and I like to hold it parallel like that. And actually, before we start, it's a good idea to get this hole already started. So we're going to take our self-tapping screw without anything, put it where the hole starts, and just once put it in all the way, take it out. So now when we put the PCB in, it's just a little less fiddly. So now we take this whole PCB with the components facing basically towards the outside, away from the 3D print. We're going to align it, add our screw in here, and then just carefully tighten it. So you can see just like that. Now it's quite firm on there. You can always rotate it a bit. That's okay. Just make sure that you rotate it so the bottom of the PCB right here is parallel to the bottom of the 3D print. Now as a first step, we can also take our vibration motor and insert it into this hole right here. Make sure it's all the way down, and then that's already secure. Before we continue with the main parts of the remote, we're actually going to take care of the sub-assemblies and of the magnets right now. As you can see right here, we have the trigger, we have the toggle, as well as the on-off switch. And all of them need a magnet glued into them. For that, I'm going to use some normal 5-minute epoxy and just some toothpicks to apply that. It's actually, I think, quite straightforward where the magnets need to go. You can see over here on the trigger, we have this channel where 2 3x6 millimeter magnets fit, as well as on the toggle, we have those 2 slots on the top where also 2 of the magnets fit. Always make sure that they are facing the correct orientation to each other. So they should not be placed in a way that they repel themselves. They actually should be placed in a way that they follow each other, or basically stick to each other. So if you just take them sticking to each other and push them in, that's how they should go. Other than the magnets being in the same orientation to each other, it does not matter which way around you put them. This all gets taken care of in the calibration. Even for the on-off switch, it doesn't matter which way around you put the magnet. Just make sure it's actually in the axis of the magnet and not 90 degrees to it. So it should be, like that. later on, we're going to need to put a component inside of here, inside of the trigger. And also this surface should be flat later on. And in order to make sure that the epoxy doesn't run out right now, I'm just going to use a bit of normal tape. Put that over here like that to basically close off the bottom. And also for this part, just take a short bit of tape, put it in here to close the gap towards the back right here. If you want to make really sure, you can also already put this part in, so the tape can't get off, but usually like that it's fine. As you can see here, all the epoxy is dried. And as I said before, on this side it should be nice and flat, which you can see it is, thanks to the tape. Also inside here, the epoxy is nice and flat. Make sure there's not too much epoxy on the outside, because this will later hinder the movement of the trigger inside the housing. So as a next step, we can continue with assembling those components, adding the spring to the trigger, adding the spring to the toggle button, and then also integrating them into the housing. Let's first start with preparing the housing for that. And as you can see here on the top, this housing has 2 holes. These holes need to be drilled out for 2.5mm diameter, and then an M3 thread needs to be cut into them. With those 2 holes drilled, we can insert the little grub screws, just like that. And we can already thread them down all the way until they almost stick out. Okay, so just like that, they almost stick out. Now what goes into there is this spring together with the toggle button or toggle mechanism. On the top of it, you can see right here, there's this little spring clip, and below that, the print likes to string a little, and if this hangs down too low, it's gonna later rub on the housing and not make this turn smoothly. So we can just use a sharp knife and just try to remove a few of those layers that drip down. So just like that, I've removed the few layers that have dripped down right here. As you can see on the spring, we have 2 little indentations on each side, right here and right here. And then we have a side that's quite big and a side that's rather slim. And we're gonna attach this toggle in this way, so it's over the bigger side. And on the bottom, we can now find the screw hole, which yet another of the small 2.2mm screws is gonna fit in. Just screw it in. Should be almost flush with the bottom here. And then that's gonna hold together the spring and the toggle. Now we can insert it into the remote, and you will hear a little click, which makes this thing snap into place. And now obviously we can still turn it. Now we're gonna align it so it is centered, and then gently tighten the grub screws on either side, and that will press on the spring, on the outside of the spring. And now, as you can see, as the spring outside is held in place, we have the spring action. One nice thing about that, if later on, or already now, as you can see, I didn't center it perfectly, so you can see it's in its idle position, it's a little out of center. So what you do is just open the 2 grub screws again, gently move it to the center, and then tighten the grub screws again. Yeah, and this time it looks better. This time it's nice and centered. and still moves freely. Now let's continue with the trigger. And for that, we actually need those two parts, which are the inside of the trigger, as well as a 20 millimeter by 4 millimeter diameter stainless steel spring. And also, yet again, some of those little screws. Now what we do is, with the screw and the spring, just fasten that on the inside of this ring. And for this, it really helps if you have a screwdriver that has a long, thin shaft, because then you can just reach through here like that and then tighten the screw. When you tighten the screw, don't tighten it too far. It can actually stick out a bit to the inside, but it should not stick out to the outside. So as you can see here, now it's flush with the plastic part. Now the other side of the spring will get fastened on this part. So you can just lay it on there, basically overlap the spring with the hole, and then again with one of the small screws, fasten it in place. And that's what it should look like. Now we can take our trigger, and if we put it inside, just make sure this spring is on the correct side. So basically what we want is we want to tension the trigger towards this side. So also the spring needs to go this way around. And then if we put it together like this, you can see, basically if you try to hold the middle, then now the spring is in tension and it wants to go back this way, which is correct. Now we can take this whole assembly, put it inside the housing. So just from the bottom, put it in like this, twist it a little bit. And now you can see we have this pin. On one side, this pin has a cutout, which goes to where the screw comes out. So just try to wiggle this into place like that. And actually looks like I tightened the screw a little too much. So let me take that out again. So also this screw, don't tighten it too much. It shouldn't stick out too much to the middle. Now let's insert this again. Wiggle this pin into place. Now it goes through. And now you can see it's in like this, I don't know, not parallel position. Now you take a flathead screwdriver, or I use the back of those tweezers. Just go in here, twist it, and at the same time push down. And once it's parallel, you should also feel it kind of drop into a recess on the other side. And once that has happened, you can see here, screw hole, again, another screw. And then we tighten this into place. Again, make sure when screwing with one finger to hold counter pressure on this side so you don't push it out of the recess again and lose the pre-tension of the spring. Okay, and now you can see the spring works. So it nicely pushes back. Feels good. Again, if something is binding, you can always just sand off or file off some of the high spots that you may have, or just some of the material until it feels nice and smooth. So that's that. Now what we can do is temporarily install this top part with PCB into the top here to have a short look if the remote actually works. And then later on, we're going to take this out again because we're going to need to apply glue. But for now, temporarily, we're going to place it in here. Now to place it in here, make sure that this cable has a nice and gentle curve to it like that. It should not have a harsh bend. And it helps if you pre-bend it a little before you insert it like that. Now we're going to take that and with the flat flex cable first, insert it into this slot so it goes through to the bottom. And then just make sure, as the back of the PCB is a little bit longer, to go in there first, kind of like an angle like this. And then just gently push down. So now let's attach the last part, which is the on-off button right here, or on-off switch. For that, just put it over this peg in the middle, take a screw and the little switch cover, and then just gently tighten the screw. Now, basically, with how much you tighten the screw, you can control how easy or hard it is to turn the switch. So don't overdo it in the beginning. And then just feel what's right for you. Like that, feels quite good. So as a next step on the bottom, we can start to connect a few more things. Now on the bottom, we can connect the flat flex cable. And as I said before, blue needs to show away from the PCB. So the easiest way to actually put this in is to have it kind of go behind the PCB here. And then come from the back, wrap around. Again, gently bend it. Try not to make a sharp bend in it. And then you can just push it in like that. Close the lever on the connector, and like that it's connected. Okay, so as the next step, we need to attach the USB connector as well as the battery. And for that, we're also going to need this part of the housing. What we can do now is basically just take our 4 wires, twist them together like that so they stay together, feed them through the housing. Okay, for now we can just push this part over here. Now we have access to our 4 wires. And so now let's go over to the soldering station and solder these wires to the connector. So as our next step, we're going to attach the USB connector as well as the battery to the remote. We're going to start with the USB connector. As you can see here, the remote is designed with this magnetic pogo pin connector. And in order to install that, we first need to find out which pin here does what. So basically which pin is positive, which pin is negative. Now, usually the way it should be is that if you look at it this way, the direction that the cable goes is the negative and the direction with no cable is the positive. To be completely sure, what you can do is to just plug your cable into a power source, attach that, and then just quickly put your multimeter to voltage measurement and just have a look if that's true. So as I said before, top should be positive, bottom should be negative. And as you can see, yes, that's true. So as you could just see, I pre-tinned the wires, pre-tinned the connector, and then soldered the wires to the connector in the correct orientation. Let's double check it again. So once you connect your USB connector again with this wire leaving to the bottom, it should be black, green, white, red. Okay, so with that done, the USB connector is done. And just one other hint, if you want to solder this one, because it has magnets, it really likes to jump towards the soldering iron. So just make sure while you solder to stick it to something else metallic so it doesn't jump around that much. What you can also see in this connector is that there is a big hole and a smaller hole inside of the connector itself. And also on the housing, we have one big and one small feature that will locate into this. So also when you insert this, make sure that the big hole goes to the big pack, which is on the top, and the small one goes to the small one, like that. Okay, and with that, we can now finally also add the battery to the remote. Now for that, we use a normal 18650 cell, unprotected. Protection is already on the PCB. And what I like to do to mount this is actually take a small knife and cut off a little bit of the protective film on the bottom here. So just like that, made a little hole in here. And now the very best way to do this would be to actually spot weld a small nickel strip both to the positive and negative pole and actually solder the wires to this nickel strip. But If you're soldering fast, you can also just solder directly to the battery. Now for the negative pole, I don't like to solder to the bottom because that will actually then hit the bottom of the case and we don't have that much space. So what I do is just, as I just showed you, cut out a little bit of the heat shrink right here, and then we can just solder directly to the side of the battery like that. So this side is pre-tinned. Now let's get the negative cable ready. Now we can take this battery and insert it into the housing, making sure to align the battery connection with the cutout. Okay, just like that. Now as a last step, before we connect the positive pole of the battery, make sure that the switch currently is in the off position, so in the position you can see right here. And then just like that, solder it directly onto here. Now we can also temporarily close the cover on here like this. And you should see it can be closed, no gap here, with a bit of wiggling around. Before we go further with the assembly, let's quickly check if the remote is actually working, if we assembled and soldered everything correctly. And for that, we can just turn on the main switch. And if you bought the kit, there will already be code on the remote. And you can see right here, showing some stuff, not really important what it's saying at the moment. You can turn it off again. The second thing we can check is to actually attach the charger and programmer cable to a computer. And then on this computer, it should at least show in the device manager the virtual COM port that this device has inside. And if you have it, if you have, for example, Arduino IDE, you can also open that. And then once you switch on the remote, on the Arduino IDE, it should also show you this kind of text or this kind of output. And that also tells you that everything is okay. Also on the display, now you can see with the computer attached, it's actually showing us the charging animation. So now that we've basically finished the integration of all the electronics and also verified that they are working, we can start to glue together the remote. For that, we need to first remove this top part again. And before you do that, remember that you need to unplug this cable. Now you can unsolder the battery again for this step. That makes the access to this connector a little bit easier, but you can also try it without removing it. Just like that, remove the flat flex cable. And then we need to pull this up. And then just like that, we can take the top part out again. Now what we need to do is actually all the way around, so basically all the way around this contour, we need to put a thin layer of epoxy in order to glue this in place. And later on, when we fill the remote with the waterproof stuff, basically have no gaps here so it can't run out again. At the same time, we also need to make sure that the waterproof stuff cannot run out between the display and the 3D print all around here. So what you're going to see me do right now is mix up a bit of 2K epoxy and then apply it all around where the display meets the 3D print. And then actually on the main housing, apply it all around here and then put in place the display. For making sure the display stays in place, I made this little piece, which basically is just a big spring, which will help you press down. So actually you don't need to press down, it will press down for you. So you're also going to see me use this. So you can see, covered this all the way around and also covered the display all the way around. Now again, we will insert the cable. Just like that it sits in. Now I'm going to use this clamp. And as you can see in the front, this actually registers right here where the trigger goes. And then in the back, my idea was to put it back here. That's actually not that nice. Not enough spring tension, but we can actually put it like this. And like that, it nicely presses both on the back and the front. And makes sure the epoxy can dry like that. Now, if you have a little bit of epoxy left, what you can do is already glue in this part right here. Again, make sure small and big hole line up with the housing. Now, when gluing this part in, be really careful not to smear any epoxy on the contact surfaces, as that will later cause problems when you try to charge or upload. So now that the glue has dried on this top part, we can actually remove our clamp. And as a next step, we can glue in place this bottom part. If you haven't done it yet, first glue in place the charging connector. And then as a next step, we're just gonna apply glue all around here and glue it into place here. Now, before that, make sure that you reattach the flat flex cable as well as the battery in case you disconnected any of them. And then also you can quickly make sure by turning on the remote that it still powers up and shows you the boot screen. Okay, so as before, I'm going to use a toothpick, apply some 5-minute epoxy, and then also here to hold this together, you will see this later, you can actually use this same clamp that we used for the top, just clip it into here and pull it into the slot down here. That works quite nicely. Also, when closing the remote, make sure that the cable are nicely stowed into here. If they are wrapped around the battery like this, you're going to have problems closing the remote. So yeah, just make sure all of the cable are somewhere basically in this area between the battery and the PCB or left of the battery where there's no vibration motor is also some space. So just make sure to tuck the cables into here and not have them squeezed between the battery and the casing. So as you can see right here, glue is applied, and now I use the spring a second time to just pull the handle down so I don't have to hold it and to close this gap. So as you can see, this almost looks like a finished remote. Now the next step will be to pour in the waterproofing material, and before we do that, let's do a bit more thorough test of the remote. What I did is I connected it to my computer via the USB connector. And when you turn on the remote, you should see this charging indicator, which already means, okay, we're getting charging power and the remote itself works. Now on the computer, I'm going to use Arduino IDE. You don't need to use that. You can use any serial terminal, but I think Arduino IDE most of you will have. On there, click on Tools, and then select the COM port that your device has. If you don't know which one it is, just unplug it again from the computer. Then the COM port should disappear, and then if you plug it in again, it should reappear. So for me, it's actually the COM3 here. Now for the board, you don't need to select the ESP32 already. You can just select an Arduino Nano. Doesn't really matter. At the moment, we're just interested in the serial monitor. And down here in the serial monitor, this is probably not here for you, so let's actually clear that. You will probably see a blank serial monitor. And what we can just do now is insert a question mark and hit enter to send it. And then the remote should answer you with this screen. And what we can do on here is, for example, put a question mark CONF, so conf for configuration. And then actually it should send us or give us this text, which is also just a short overview. We're on the TX, our MAC address. I'm at the moment not really interested, but important is that we actually get this information and that we get some values here. If that also works, it means we can communicate, and it also means the remote is working. Now, if you want to go a step further, you can actually remove the charger again, and then the remote should boot up. Can be that it shows you this error message. Then you just switch off the remote, switch it on again. Now it will tell you boot. If you didn't calibrate the remote in the last step, then the remote is probably going to show you EC, then off means hands off. Then it's going to show you this animation, so you need to push full throttle. Then it's going to show you arrows to the left, so you push the toggle to the left, arrows to the right, so toggle to the right, and then it should tell you safe. As a last step, if we want to be real sure that everything works, we can actually pair the remote to the receiver. So for that, we'll get the receiver. And please make sure to always use it with the antenna, never use it without any antenna. Now the remote at the moment should probably tell you EP, which means error and pairing, and flash those arrows to the side. To pair the receiver, we're going to hold down the bind button while plugging it into a power source. And then this bind LED should flash rapidly. Now on the remote, we're going to push the lever or the toggle button to the left like it shows. And then it's going to show safe, or first it shows quickly PA, and then it's going to show safe. And then it's going to turn fully on. After the pairing, the receiver should show a solid red light, which means it's actually connected to the remote right now. And also on the remote down here, you can see the full indication of signal strength. Now you can, of course, unlock the remote, just like that. And then on the remote, you can play around with the levels. You can also hook up the ESCs to your receiver now and check that everything is working. Basically, you could fully integrate the receiver into your board, make sure everything works. Just remember before you go on the water to actually fill the remote, which is what we're going to do next. So at this step, we are ready to fill the remote. And for that, we are obviously going to need the material to fill it. Now, this may change in the future. At the moment, I'm using this 2-component polyurethane electronics potting material. We're going to need a scale to weigh out the ingredients, 2 mixing cups, one to start mixing initially. Then we're going to transfer it over, mix it a bit more in the second cup, just to make sure nothing is stuck to the bottom of the first cup. Obviously something to mix it, some protective gloves. And now for the remote, to properly fill it, there is this stand which can be slid into the remote like that. And that makes sure the remote is at the perfect angle to fill it to an even level. I'm going to fill the potting material from the front right here until I cannot fill anything in here anymore. So basically at some point it will just be full to the top. And then it helps to actually tilt the remote forward a little bit, and we can attach the plug in the front. And then if we keep it at that angle, just make sure to fill that much potting material into the bag. So basically our connector is covered. Don't fill it all the way full, because later on we're also gonna have to insert this plug into the bag, which is also what holds the lanyard later on. As you can see, it is cut out at the bottom, but anyways, it's enough to basically cover the connector in the bag, and then that's good. So as you can see right now, it's starting to go in there more slowly, because it actually needs to flow around and push its way through here. Helps to wait a bit, and we can fill a bit more. Okay, so you can see it almost doesn't flow out anymore. I'm going to do it one more time. So pour in a little bit of the compound and until it's fully covered. Now tilt back a little bit. And then we're going to take our front plug, put it into here the correct way around if it has text in your case. Just push it in like that. Now we're going to turn our attention to the back. I'm going to use something to actually hold this up a little bit, just like that. And now all of the rest of the potting compound, as I said, we're going to pour in the bag just to make sure the connector is covered. Connector is fully covered. I cannot see the black of the connector anymore. I can also see no wires. And then just like that, we're going to let it rest. Now the stuff I'm currently using takes about 7 hours to harden. However, after like 1 or 2 hours, it's already good enough. So you can take the remote out of the stand and let it dry somewhere else. On this remote, the potting compound has fully dried. And as you can see, I also attached all the inputs again. And now the last step is to attach the handle. This handle is completely changeable after you build the remote. So you can print this out of TPU. You can change the shape. You can print it solid like I did right here in PLA. And it will just slide over here. Before we attach this handle, we also need to insert this little plug, which is also the place that the lanyard will also be mounted. And to do that, this just goes in the bag here. Now, as you can see in this remote, I actually filled in a little bit too much of the potting compound. And now it's a bit hard to get it in. If you want to prevent that, just insert this plug already when you poured in the potting compound, and then it will just push away whatever is too much. To insert that, we're also going to use some of the small 2.2 millimeter screws, just a little bit longer version. Now it depends if you have a flexible handle or like a TPU handle, you're probably going to want to insert the screws right into here. For a solid printed handle, you can insert them through the handle as well and secure it that way. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to let this sit on here like that, put on the handle, and by pushing down now, all my holes align and I can put in the screws. As you can see right here, handle is mounted with both screws. I put the lanyard through, basically just wrapped it around this peg in the middle and then pulled it tight on itself. Now this hole in the back is actually for the USB connector. So you can see you can just put it in here and it gets attracted by the magnet. And then also you can take it out just by pulling on it. One hint on this connector, as there are metal contacts inside here and they obviously don't like salt water, like anything metal. Make sure after you use this in salt water to just rinse it with a bit of fresh water. Basically that covers the whole remote, all the metal parts right here. They are happy if you rinse them in fresh water after use. And if you want to be real sure that they don't oxidize, just quickly remove the handle, clean them every now and then, maybe with some rubbing alcohol, and then you should be good to go. And so with that, we're at the end of this video. Now for configuring the remote and for setting up all the options you have in software, I will make a separate video just to keep it from this build video. And I think the video is already long enough. I hope you liked the video. I hope you had fun building your remote. I hope you will have fun using it on the water. And with that, all that's left to say is have a good time. Bye.